just because I might have scars or I might not have the breasts that I had before, or my body might not be exactly the way that it was, that doesn't mean that I can't go out and pursue my dreams and chase those big lofty goals I had for myself. And it wasn't until I was 30, which in the modeling world is send you off to pasture. I had the opportunity to model for Sports Illustrated. And I was the first woman with a mastectomy to model for Sports Illustrated swimsuit. Something that I never in a million years thought, one, I could do even before I had a mastectomy. And to do that in my 30s, post mastectomy, it was just this game-changing moment for me in realizing the world was my oyster. And if you just let those naysayers and that negative talk stop you from chasing your dreams, it's going to be the most limiting thing in your life. And you just have to find a way to block out the noise.
Hello and welcome back to Experable. In this show, we learn from the success and struggles of the people we admire, dive deep into concepts, tools, and practices relevant to developing a strong character, a healthy mindset, and the emotional weaponry that allows us to live by design and even on really bad days, love what we see in the mirror. Today, I am talking to Allyn Rose, who is a breast cancer advocate, a motivational speaker, an IVF mom and advocate, author, and content creator. As a 24-year-old Miss America contestant, Allyn made headlines across the globe with her controversial decision to undergo a preventative double mastectomy after losing her mother, grandmother, and great aunt to breast cancer. Her story inspired a whole generation of women to take charge of their healthcare choices. And to prove that your scars are beautiful, Allyn also became the first woman with a mastectomy to model for Sports Illustrated swimsuit. She's also the founder of The Preventative, a non-profit healthcare platform which serves as a resource for women undergoing mastectomy. She's also the creator of the Self-Exam-gram, a social media movement teaching women the proper way to perform a monthly self-breast exam. Allyn's story and how she has approached the good and bad in her life are a testament to the power of conviction and self-belief. In this conversation, we talk about Allyn's journey from being a contestant on a beauty pageant to making this life-altering decision of removing her breasts and all the challenges that came along. We learn from Allyn how to maintain a healthy perspective around your appearance, especially if you don't quite like what you see in the mirror, and how not to let it dictate the choices you make in life. We also talk about how to protect yourself against external negativity as you share pieces of yourself on the internet, creating online personas, and not letting any of it overshadow the work that you do, and so much more. This was an incredible conversation. I learned a lot from it. I hope it helps you too. So let's get to it. You've done a lot of incredible work. You also have a nonprofit that is doing incredible work in the world. So first of all, thank you so much for doing all of that. Since all of us benefit from it. So thank you for that. But I have to ask, is there a commonality to all of these roles that you play? Is there a central mission that you are pursuing and intentionally picking the roles that you're playing?
So I think it all really circles around breast cancer advocacy, whether I knew it or not, starting sort of each of these elements. But, people always will look at me. If you knew me growing up, we went to high school together, people would say, never in a million years would I imagine that girl would do a beauty pageant or model or do any of the things that I'm doing now. Right. I was a big tomboy growing up, played in a punk rock band. Never in a million years would I be that girl, that you imagine doing those sort of things. But when I was in college, I got an email that said that there was a local pageant that was raising money for breast cancer research. And I thought, you know what, my mom would have loved for me to do something like that. Like I said, I was a tomboy, never wore a dress, never wore makeup. And in college, I said, you know what, let me give myself a second and reinvent myself, try a few new things. And so it all started with this breast cancer charity pageant. And, before I knew it, I competed in that. Somehow I won. Then I got kind of bit by the bug, competed at Miss USA, competed at Miss America. When I was a Miss America contestant, I had this really incredible viral moment where my story went all over the world. I had shared with a friend that I was going to have a preventative mastectomy because I had lost my mom, my grandmother, my great aunt, all these women in my family to breast cancer. And so that viral moment changed the trajectory of my life. And I go from Miss America contestant to personal advocate to starting my own nonprofit. And, everything has just sort of come from my mother's story, really. And they might seem
Yeah.
like they're all over the place, but there is that sort of central theme of, this is something that I started to really honor my mom's memory. And, you know, 10, 12 years later, here we are.
That's incredibly beautiful. But I have to ask, Miss America, pageantry of any kind, I'm sure there are deeper challenges to it, but it is there is like it encourages vanity to a degree, right? It encourages you to center what you're doing around how you look. So to be in the throes of that, to be in the thick of things where you're participating in such a prestigious contest, and then also to make this decision to get mastectomy, and we all know breasts are like the most feminine part of your body, or at least that's the perception around it. For you to make that decision, what was that like? That must have needed so much courage considering what you were doing at that time.
So I think for me, growing up, not being someone who put a lot of emphasis on the way that I look. And I know that sounds really crazy. Someone would think, okay, you were a model, you competed in beauty pageants, of course, the way that you look matters. And it does. But I think the way that you
Mhm.
look matters to every 20 something year old. Is you're coming into your body, you're coming into your femininity, like you said. So your breasts, your way you look, they impact how you face the world. So I think when I was deciding to, have a preventative mastectomy, of course, there was an element of, well, this is really going to change how I look at myself. It's going to change the way that the world looks at me. It might take away some opportunities for me. Maybe I might never compete in a pageant again. I might never have a modeling career, all of these sort of things. And I wasn't married. I didn't have any children. There's always the thought, what person is ever going to love the body that I have after this surgery? So
Right.
it was a really challenging experience in that sense. But I think I went into it with long term perspective. And I was able to put that sort of vanity on the back burner and say, hey, the way that I look doesn't matter. I want to be around for the next 60, 70 years because I knew what it was like for my mom. My mom was diagnosed with a breast cancer in her 20s. She almost didn't live to have children. And for me, I said, I never want to be in the position where I have to tell my 16-year-old daughter that she's going to live the rest of her life without her mom, like my mom did. And if that means my vanity goes out the window, it's not the most important thing. So I think having that good perspective, that family support, I was able to just say, this doesn't matter. My life matters.
Yeah. Considering the choices, yeah, I guess it in a way was an easy choice, but it's still, I I don't doubt that it must have taken somewhat of a toll on you to actually go through that process. And
Oh, absolutely. I mean, waking up the next day, I have no breasts. I've got these tubes hanging out of my body. At the time, I had a boyfriend who was being my caretaker, and I just remember looking at myself in the mirror, thinking, "Oh my God, what have I done? How is this person ever gonna find me sexy again?
yeah.
Is this going to be the deal breaker?" And fortunately, my then boyfriend is now my husband. We have a little girl, another one on the way. And he said, I don't care what you look like. Same thing. I want you to be around for the next 60, 70 years. And I was really, really fortunate to have that and just to have these constant vocal reminders in my ear of what was important. But of course, it was a long journey of self acceptance to get back to a point where I liked looking at what I saw in the mirror again.
Yeah, I bet. I bet it was a long journey and it must have had so many ups and downs. Your husband is obviously a very beautiful person, but I think you can advise people out there who look at their bodies or look at their faces and they find all of these flaws. And everybody finds some flaw.
Yeah,
But
of
for
course.
some of us, yeah, for some of us, we are not so fortunate. We are surrounded by people who kind of are not very supportive, who in fact remind us of all our inadequacies. But when it comes to how you look, there is only so much you can change, right? It's genetic,
Right.
and unless you're willing to throw money at it and go under the knife, there's not really much you can do about it. So to those people who allow these inadequacies to define who they are, to define standards of beauty for them, and to ultimately hold them back in life? What would you say to them?
Gosh, it's tough. I think we all struggle with self identity and body
Yeah,
positivity and,
of course.
having these sort of things. And I think you just have to realize that the only person who's getting in your way is you. And you can let this noise of naysayers and people who want to be critical impact your life, or you can
Hmm.
say, this has nothing to do with who I am as a person, what I have to give, what I have to offer. And I think sometimes you just really have to find something outside of the way that you look that you can identify with. For me, once I had my mastectomy and I got to the point where I just said, okay, I'm never going to be a famous model. I'm never going to be able to compete in pageants anymore. All of those big dreams and hopes I had for myself, like that's off the table. And I started developing other aspects of my personality that I found value in. I started
Mm.
delving into new hobbies, new talents, nurturing those aspects of myself that had little to nothing to do with the way that I looked. And that was
Yeah.
so, so helpful. But then I also realized as time went on, like I said before, I was the only person that was putting these limits and restrictions on what I could do in my life on myself. And once I got past that, once I realized, hey, just because I might have scars or I might not have the breasts that I had before, or my body might not be exactly the way that it was, that doesn't mean that I can't go out and pursue my dreams and chase
Hmm.
those big, lofty goals I had for myself. And it wasn't until I was 30, which in the modeling world is you send you off to pasture. Your career is done and over with, and you're useless. Um, I had the opportunity to model for Sports Illustrated. And I was the first woman with a mastectomy to model for Sports Illustrated swimsuit. Something that I never in a million years thought, one, I could do even before I had a mastectomy. And to do that
Yeah.
in my 30s, post mastectomy, it was just this game changing moment for me in realizing the world was my oyster. And
Yeah.
if you just let those naysayers and that negative talk stop you from chasing your dreams, it's going to be the most limiting thing in your life. And you just have to find a way to block out the noise. That's the best advice I can give.
That's a beautiful message because we live in a very strange world that's constantly changing. So you never know what opportunity is going to come around. Also, I think when you dismiss yourself based on how you look, you're deciding a future that hasn't played out yet, which is
Oh yeah, and,
just,
and yeah, and then also the standard of beauty changes every 30 seconds. So,
yeah. Yeah.
what's in now, what's popular now, what you think you want to look like or who you want to emulate. I mean, 20 seconds later it's going to be somebody else. So,
Yeah.
you just have to find that. I hate using the term inner beauty, but you really have to find something about yourself where you say,
Yeah.
"Hey, I like who I am." And I heard this great thing actually this morning. I was like scrolling through TikTok or something like that, and someone was saying, if you focus on loving yourself, it's almost
Hmm.
a limiting thing because you're on the outside looking in at like this idea of who you are. But if you focus on loving the experience of being you, the experience of being yourself, that is such a freeing and amazing thing where you're able to come together, to grow, to love yourself as you change along the way. And I just found that to be a very, very powerful thing.
That is a powerful message. Yeah, that's a beautiful message. I wish the entire world could internalize that. Um, well, recently, I'm not fully like I don't have all the information on this, but I think it was the Miss America pageant itself, wherein a transgender um, woman who was formerly a man won the contest. Didn't that just happen very recently in US?
So, the Miss Universe pageant allows
Oh,
transgender
okay.
contestants.
Hmm.
They have had numerous transgender winners. So, Spain a couple years ago was a transgender woman. The new owner of the organization, so of all of Miss Universe organization,
Hmm.
is a transgender woman. So, they're really making strides towards being more inclusive in that sense.
Inclusive.
But the actual winner has not been a transgender woman yet.
Oh, all right. So, but I found that very, there was a part of me that was like, okay, so even that's possible, right? something that as a child, when I'm also like 31, so, and also I've never considered participating in beauty contests, but when I was growing up, and every girl at some point in her life thinks about this stuff, so
Right.
that was not a
You see it on
possibility when you were
TV,
growing
it's
up.
like the big dream.
Exactly. Well, I'm come from a very conservative family, so the first time my mother saw me playing with the lipstick, she just knocked it out of my hand. She's like, "Go study." So yeah, it's only later you understand that, oh, you know what? This is just as hard as getting a master's, if not
Right,
harder.
right.
Because yeah, so much of it is completely outside your control. So I feel like anybody who is too focused on beauty, I think their life is tougher because there's just so much you can do with it. But I also feel like you got offered that Sports Illustrated shoot. I think that in itself shows you that the world is changing, people are changing, perceptions are shifting. So, what was so important yesterday, as you said, it may not be so important tomorrow. So, but if you close off your options, then you've already shrunk your life and yourself.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And I mean, I
yeah.
grew up and I've always had really thin lips. It's just my genetics. It's who I am. And I remember working and sitting in the modeling chair and I'd look over and I'd see these women with these big, full, beautiful lips and always, want to emulate that. And
Yeah.
this makeup artist one day, she was like, "Oh, you just have, you have Bo Derek lips." And it just made me realize, like, 20 years ago, maybe my lips were the trend, but what we're seeing now is it's completely
Uh-huh.
different, and things are just so circular and they're changing. And if you're
Yeah.
constantly trying to hop on the trend of what's beautiful now, you're never going to be satisfied, because once
Hmm.
you achieve it, boom, we're on to the next thing. And
Yeah.
so you just really have to find that balance of being comfortable with yourself. It's okay to follow trends and to be interested in those things, but when you're going to these absolute extremes to emulate what's trendy now, it never
Mhm.
works out for you long term.
Yeah, I'm with you on that completely. And I also feel for this younger generation that feels way more pressure to do all of this than we ever did. Because
Yep.
we did grow up with social media, but it wasn't so invasive. Like, at least for me, it was very controlled till like a certain age. And then I wasn't really into it as much till I started running my business. So I do feel for them. I think it's amplified all of this obsession with physical appearance and with how your life looks from the outside. It's so much more amplified. And now I have to ask you, like, as you made that switch from participating in that pageant to becoming this advocate and spreading awareness around breast cancer and openly talking about your own experience with going through the mastectomy, which in itself couldn't possibly have been easy, and it was highly emotional also because you were talking about your mom, but you gave all of these incredibly intelligent speeches on the subject, and you were, despite the emotionality of the subject, you were very articulate, you got your point across. And just there must have been a very, like, a switch of mindset, and like some gears must have shifted for you to go from being a contestant on a beauty show to doing all of this work. What was that like?
Well, it wasn't sort of an overnight thing. Of course, I had
Hmm.
this big viral moment where I was sort of thrust into the spotlight when it comes to making this healthcare decision. And I
Hmm.
was on all these talk shows and doing these things. I had the opportunity to give a TED talk. But I think my life prior to competing in pageants sort of led me to that. I always wanted to be a lawyer. I've always loved public speaking. And so all of those skills it
Hmm.
came with me along the way. And it was a bit of a natural transition, but I did have some time to really build on it and get experience sharing. I feel like there's something, either it's a wire or screw loose or it's something beneficial. I don't know, but I've always felt very, very comfortable speaking about my mother's story. Maybe that's because, one of the last things my mom said to me was, don't let my life be in vain. She wanted to have me write a book about her life or something. She just didn't want it to end in that moment. And, I can't imagine how terrifying it is to know this is it. And so I made it really a mission for me to not only share my personal story, but why my mom's story was impactful for me and has encouraged me to have this long-term perspective, to go out, to share the message. And so I don't know, it's come a little bit naturally to me, I have to say that. But what I didn't realize was the type of emotional fatigue that I would have over time
Right.
because you're
Right.
talking about death, death, death all the
Yeah.
time. And you don't realize that it's just sort of picking and, you know, wearing at you a bit. And I did have to
Yeah.
take a moment and just say, hey, I need a break for a while. I can't really do this anymore. I can't have my entire life be talking about how my mom died. And I think anybody who works in the advocacy space, particularly in healthcare, has had that sort of
Yeah.
past trauma, can understand that sometimes it really does weigh heavy on you.
Yeah.
But, you know, my mom passed away, gosh, it's coming up on like 20 years now. Um, but I miss her every day. It's still a raw thing in my life. You know, I had a little girl 2 years ago. I got another one on the way, and it's a daily reminder that I don't have my mom here. And so it's just a different type of mourning, but it's also inspiring to me to say, hey, my life has really come full circle now. All of these healthcare choices that I made to be around for my future husband, for my future children, I'm living that future now. And that's a
Yeah.
special moment. And to know that, you know, the gift I gave my children of having a mother who's here
Hmm.
is a very, very rewarding experience.
You are very courageous, and I bet your mom is super proud wherever she is.
Thank
She's
you
very
so
proud of
much.
all the work you've done. Yeah. I wish she was here. I'm sorry that you ever had to go through that loss. But yeah, we in Hinduism, we believe that everything happens for a reason. I think all religion believe that. And if that's true, I think that is very true for you, because your mom, even though she was no longer around, she gave you, and just she kept giving you all of these gifts. So yeah.
Absolutely. And I say this all the time, and people might think it's a little bit crass, but um, losing my mom led to some of the greatest experiences of my life. You know, I probably never would have competed in pageants. I never would have had that
Hmm.
opportunity to really have these crowning achievements where I got to walk on stage in front of millions of
Hmm.
people and feel glamorous and beautiful and experience that. You know, I wouldn't
Yeah.
have had this platform to share with my generation about,
Yeah.
you know, self advocacy and all of that. I probably never would have met my husband. I wouldn't have my children. My life would be very, very different. And of course, you know, you always say I'd give anything to have my mom back, but at the same time, I'm very fortunate for having this experience in my life that has led to so many other wonderful things. And I said, this is not going to be the most defining moment of my life. I'm going to let it be a catalyst for greater things.
Yeah, you have truly done that, I have to say. In fact, like anybody who follows you on Instagram is aware of just how much of your life, and especially the tougher parts of it, you share with other people. And it amazes me because I'm so protective of my private life, that I'm always amazed when people can, share their personal life, especially when they can share the stories of loss. And like, you've shared a lot of your IVF journey as well. You've shared about your miscarriage, which was painful to listen to. I can't imagine what it was like for you to actually talk about it. So why do you do that? And what, like, what is that like, putting so much of your life out there for people? And you have to be aware that yes, there will be people who will benefit from it and who will be considerate and respectful of what you're doing, but there will also be people who will have opinions that will not be so supportive, and they will have no qualms in voicing those opinions and in shoving them at
Yeah,
you.
sure.
So
Well, I always think when I'm going through a challenging time, there's nothing like having somebody else who can just say, "Hey, me too," and you find that empathy in another person. And that's not the case for everybody. I think sometimes people like to have, you know, their moment to themselves, but for
mhm,
me, community has always really been helpful. And so I just thought, you know, I'm obviously not the first woman to have a miscarriage. I'm not the first woman to go through IVF. I'm not the first woman to
yeah,
have a mastectomy. But I
yeah,
knew what it was like preparing and planning and experiencing all of these things, and sometimes feeling like I was the only person in the world going through what I was going through. And
yeah,
it just made me realize how important it is to share and to destigmatize the pain and the fear, and just sometimes how normal these things are. What I didn't realize until I had a miscarriage, like 1 in 4 women have a miscarriage in their life. That is mind blowing
wow,
to me. And the fact that
yeah,
women don't talk about it, and it's shrouded in secrecy, and you're just supposed to
yeah,
suffer in silence. And The
Yeah.
fact that we don't tell people we're pregnant until we're 12 weeks along because then it's safe. I mean, that's so sad to me. You're having to, hold this joy and this exciting moment in your life back because you're scared that you might have to talk about having a potential miscarriage. And I just said, if I'm sharing all the positives, I'm sharing the wins. I want to share the failures too, because that's part of it. And, I share a lot about my life online. I don't share everything. And I think that helps too. There are things that I keep private to myself. And, your persona online is one thing from the person that you are. I try to be as authentic as I can, but with limitations. Um, and yeah, it's hard to write the posts and click publish and putting it out there for the world to judge and consume. But I've been very fortunate to have a really positive audience. Every once in a while, you've got some nasty person that has something to say. But, if you're able to look at it in the perspective of for every one message, there's 100 positive messages, it makes the sharing a little bit easier.
Yeah. But I have to ask you, like, because now there is this accepted belief that content is king, content has to be, no
Mhm.
matter your industry, it simply has to be a part of your working process, your work process, your business processes, because it is what it will get you all the success. So everybody needs to be visible now, which is, I think, for some of us, very difficult to do. So, how do you manage not to let the external negativity? You said there's one negative message, but there are 100 positive ones, but we all know that we are wired to focus on that one negative
Mhm.
one so much more than the 100 positive ones. So how do you not let that negativity, considering that you're sharing something so personal, something so, like, you're making yourself so vulnerable, how do you not let that negativity seep into who you are and the positivity you're trying to create in your life?
When it comes to having those little negative voices be the thing that's at the forefront. I guess I have to say I've had a lot of practice not letting it bug me. When I first started out, I remember so vividly. I feel like this is burned into my psyche. I was on a pageant message board, and this is when I first started sharing my story as a Miss America contestant. And someone said, "Oh, Allyn Rose, she's a nasty opportunist who's used her mother's death to help her win beauty pageants." And
Wow.
oh, was that a gut punch? Because I just, went down the rabbit hole of, oh my gosh, am I doing that? Am I sharing the story for the wrong reasons? Is this manipulative? Is this self serving? And it just ate away at me for years and years and years. And there would always be these little comments here and there, people saying, oh, she's never actually going to have a mastectomy. This is just a storyline that she came up with to try to win Miss America. And, I really would let it bug me in the beginning. But as I've gotten older, I've realized that when people speak about you like that, it says a lot more about them than it does about you.
Yes.
And I've realized, man, how unhappy does someone have to be to sit behind a computer and talk
Yeah.
about basically a little girl who's lost her mom and who's sharing this story. Like, this is either, you know, some contestant who's like competing with you and feeling jealousy and envy or something, or like someone's mom. Nobody else is on these
Yeah.
message boards talking about these things. And how sad if an adult is out there sharing that kind of vitriolic language about somebody else and someone else's experience that they haven't lived and they don't understand. And so I just realized that a lot of times it's coming from a place of hurt, and it's a place of hurt with them. And that helps me reframe things and not take it personally because, at the end of the day, you can only do so much. You can only be representative for so many different people, but your message is
Yeah.
valid. And there's somebody out there who needs to hear what you have to say.
Yeah. I can't even imagine being in that moment, reading a message like that. Yeah, I have to say, like they say, hurt people, and at the same
Exactly.
time, like I get it. I get we live in a very strange world where there are people who are corrupt and who are willing to trade their integrity for personal gain. But at the same time, I also feel like even when you are looking at someone's life and thinking this is suspicious, this person is not what they're appearing to be, to actually put that in words, I think it takes a certain kind of person to do that. Because if you have
Yeah.
nothing kind to say, much rather, hold your silence, not say anything at all, and not be a
Yeah.
reason that there's something negative out there. So I completely get what you're saying, and I hope that this, if my listeners are hearing this and they are struggling with this, they remember that, because it takes a certain kind of person to say something so vicious,
Hmm.
like that
When
message
I
that
just
you.
think like you also have too much time on your hands. There are not enough
Yeah,
hours in the day for me to like be
yeah,
on the deep depths of the internet, going on someone else's social media page to
yeah,
leave a message,
right.
anonymous or not. Like, man, I wish I had the luxury of being able to talk trash to people. Like, not enough hours in the day.
Yeah, it's true what they say. Nobody, like, we constantly feel like, oh, I wonder what they're thinking about me. They're really not. Nobody's thinking about
Right.
you. Because,
Yep.
like, if I see something and I don't like it, I'll just press that cross button and I'll close the window and I'll move on. So, yeah,
Hmm.
I'm not going to sit there and turn into a freaking troll and be like, oh, let me just get this person now. That would be
When
very,
you
very strange.
think about like going out in public, right? Like, all these times like, people are gonna like my outfit, like do I have spinach in my teeth? People are very self-absorbed and they're worried about the spinach in their teeth and they're worried about their outfit and whether their partner thinks they look good. So nobody's looking at you. Like I've realized this as I've gotten older. Like it's
Yeah.
the last thing that you need to worry about because everyone else is in their own little bubble.
Yeah. When I was younger, I had like years and years of extreme cystic acne. So much so that people thought I had contagious skin disease or chicken pox or something like that. So I would be asked to leave the public places, the restaurants, which is very, it was acne, but it was like, it was all over my face. It was physically painful, because if you've ever had a cystic acne, you know that thing is not easy to carry around.
Yeah.
And then to have all of these people laughing at me. So I took like a completely defiant stance where I just stopped caring about how I looked and just like wouldn't even look in the mirror if I didn't have to, absolutely. And it became like, it went so far that I would go to like very prestigious events in my sweatpants. Then finally somebody had to sit me down and be like, okay, you've taken it too far now. You have to stop showing up to places in your sweatpants. So, but I have to say, just going through all of those years, I continued to rack up achievements. Like, I was a student at the time, I was very young.
Mhm.
My studies didn't suffer, my career did not suffer. I was able to do everything that I wanted to do. And no, and the moment that I stopped considering those statistic acne to be a problem, they stopped being a problem.
Right.
I don't know if
When
that's
you
helpful
have
or
to put
not,
that
but
the armor on, right? And
yeah.
acne is such a sensitive thing. And I mean, fortunately, I had, I don't want to say bad acne because there's a difference between bad acne and bad acne. But I did have acne growing up and cystic acne and scarring and all these kinds of problems. And it, man, does it impact how you face the world and how you think about yourself and how people respond to you. Unfortunately, I had a sister-in-law who was able, she's an esthetician that, completely changed my life and cleared up my skin. But when I see other people who are really suffering with deep cystic acne, like
Yeah,
how internally and outwardly painful that has to
that
be.
can.
And you really do have to sort of, like you were saying, put this armor on. And whether that's just completely ignoring, the problem and saying, hey, I'm not, looking at anything when it comes to my face, when it comes to the clothes, all the things, like it's a brave thing to be able to do that because not that many people have the power to, I think, compartmentalize it and say, hey, there are other aspects of me that have nothing to do with, what's on my face right now.
Yeah. It took me a while to realize that the defense mechanism had sort of become toxic, because while I wouldn't care about how I looked, I also had this narrative playing in my head that I am ugly. Like, my
Mm-hmm.
physical appearance should never be the point of focus, because if it were to become the focus, all the opportunities will be denied to me. So I did
Mm-hmm.
subconsciously believe it. It took me a while to realize that, when people were like, why don't you ever wear cosmetics? Why don't you ever like do something with your hair? My hair is curly, but my hair is also like, it's not, I just have never paid attention to it. So I don't know how to manage this stuff. So people would say comments, stuff like that. I'm like, I don't care. I don't care. But then at some point I had to realize I do care. It's just that I can't afford to actually let that in, let that
Mm-hmm.
be the focus. So I do get it. And I do think that there is a disconnect because when we see someone going through what we have gone through, we feel like, oh, my heart goes out to this person. But this is not something that defines this person. I will not look at this person or judge them based on these qualities. But we continue to do that to ourselves, which
Yep.
is very like we don't even realize it and we do it.
Counterproductive.
So,
Yeah. No,
yeah.
definitely. And I think it's it's easier to have empathy for other people, but it's really hard to have empathy for yourself, right? And
Yeah.
so I think we have to, I always say, like, give yourself grace. Like, there have been so many moments in my life where I've just said, oh, why can't I handle this better? Why am I having this emotional
Yeah.
response? When I had a child, how difficult it was. And, I think I struggle with a bit of the baby blues or postpartum depression. I'm like, God, women have been having children for centuries. And like, why am I sitting here boo-hooing about this moment when there are people who would, give their right arm to have a baby? And how dare I,
Yeah.
you know, uh, feel sad about this. And I had a friend who said to me, it's possible to grieve and be grateful at the same time. And that was one of those like life changing
Yeah.
moments for me where I just said, okay, yeah, the two are not mutually exclusive. I'm
Mhm.
allowed to feel both ways. And that has been very freeing for me. And every time I'm having a struggle, I try to remember that quote.
Yeah, your positivity comes across, in your content, and then how I've seen you talk about some of the most challenging subjects in a very happy, very positive way, which is not easy to do. So I think that's a good example. But it also makes me wonder. First of all, did you ever outgrow that image completely, where you were this contestant on a beauty pageant? Do you feel like you outgrew that as you started talking about all of these very serious topics, or did that follow you?
No, I think it's definitely followed me. And I have a very, very positive view of women who compete in pageants. And I think they get a bad rap, and people like to talk about
Yeah.
how they're superficial and 100% based on your
Yeah.
looks, and it really couldn't be further from the truth. And I say that not because I've competed and I'm trying to defend myself, but because the most accomplished women and the best friendships that I've ever had, and women who have continued to be a support system for me over the years, most of them are women that I've competed in pageants with, and they've gone on to do incredible things. And when I say incredible, it's not just doctors and lawyers. It's, women who are the most amazing moms that I've ever seen, women who are out there going, sharing their messages, being support systems for others. And they're women who came up in these systems. And I feel like a lot of who I am and the resiliency that I have and my ability to do the things that I'm doing now are because of skills and traits and having other women rub off on me through pageants.
Right.
And so, it's something I'm very proud of. It's something I hope will be a footnote in, my bio and who I am for the rest of my life, because it is,
Yeah.
it's part of me. And, it has become part of, what do they say? It's not the whole book, but it's a chapter, but it's a very important chapter in my life.
Yeah. So you would say that, it's vital to be comfortable with each individual piece of your identity.
Yeah. And I think you can also not like chapters of your life and say, hey, this
Hmm.
was,
Hmm.
a mistake, or I didn't like doing this, but I've never regretted any moment of my life because it's led
Yeah.
me to where I am. And there have been ups and downs, and definitely things that, you know, hindsight being 2020, I might have done differently, but um, you know, I am who I am because of all of those experiences together.
Yeah, that's a very positive view of it. And I wish more people would adopt that. You can't regret anything if it has led to who you are today. And if you love that person, then you have to love everything that led up to it. I really
Well, it's
appreciate you
okay too
sharing
to,
that.
like, I think, put the bad experiences in a box and lock them away for
Hmm.
later.
Hmm.
A lot of people are like, oh, you have to focus, you have to heal in the moment. I'm not that kind of person. Sometimes I literally have to,
Okay.
like, package away the trauma, like put it on a shelf and get to
Yeah.
the point where I'm like ready to process it and take it off. And that, I think, has served me really well. And it might not be until like years later that I deal with the issue, but
Hmm.
we always come back to it. And sometimes you're just in a better, braver,
Yeah.
more energetic place to deal with issues and trauma.
I guess that's a healthy approach too.
Well, I just think like, what is that adage that they use in the airplane? Like you have to put your mask on before helping others and like you can't like pour
Yes.
from the empty cup. So sometimes
Uh-huh,
like
uh-huh.
you're just grasping at nothing. Like there's no energy to give. There's no you to deal with the trauma in the moment and you
Yeah.
just got to give yourself time to like come up for air before you
Yeah.
handle the tough times. And like that's okay too.
Yeah, that's actually a wonderful way of looking at it. And I think that that can be very helpful. And it also kind of makes sense because even our brain deliberately suppresses things. So that has to be a healthy one of the healthy ways of dealing with the things that don't go your way. Because if your
Right.
brain like is wired to do it as a defense mechanism, then it's clearly something that's helpful. So I guess what you're saying is right, and you can shove it aside and keep moving forward if that is the method that serves you best. So definitely that seems healthy enough. But I have to ask you, like, you are now you've played so many roles, so many very different roles, and you've all of them have such a high degree of importance. The work that you've done out there in the world, and obviously it all accumulates, right? Because of thanks to the internet, nothing disappears anymore. So all of it follows you. So do you, as you are now running a business that's like you already have a nonprofit, but you're also running a for-profit business. So as you're running that business as a business owner, do you feel like there is already an established identity out there that restricts what you can put now share as a business owner, or you just are determined to stand in your truth and be 100% authentic without giving much thought to the brand identity that maybe is best for your business?
I think always, if I'm going to do something, I want it to be something that naturally flows for me and
Right.
makes sense for me. So I don't think that there's, really anything that I might pursue or do in my life where I feel like my past or the things that I've done are is going to negatively impact how people view me. Um, and
Yeah.
I'm not really sure like maybe running for public office someday, that's something that I've always wanted to do. And like people might have a negative view of like, oh, this girl competed in Miss America, competed in Miss USA, whatever, she's vapid and shallow. But I would hope that the other things that I've done in my life speak for themselves. And there's always
Yeah.
going to be somebody that has something nasty to say or doesn't like you or thinks you don't represent them. And so I think you just have to go into new chapters of your life and new passions and projects, uh, building upon what you have instead of having to completely compartmentalize it and say like, okay, this is the former me and like now this is the business owner me.
I love that you said that because a lot of people try to adopt that approach, that clear demarcation of territories. But considering we're human beings, that's not actually possible. And would you agree that we really cannot judge the perception before we put something out there? Because people are weird these days. They just have these unique perspectives that you just simply don't see coming, especially in America. I think we like in India is still um, sort of conservative in some ways. In some ways it's adopting a very modern approach, so we kind of see where this is going to go. But with America, like I work with so many Americans, I hear a lot of like the things that go on in your country, and I would be like, oh my god, this is a thing, this is a thing that
Mhm.
people are fighting for. And in a way it's beautiful, but at the same time I could not have imagined this becoming such a huge issue. So I feel like the public perception is very unpredictable. So I think, would you say that it's okay to go ahead and put out there what you feel is your truth and not worry so much, even if you are trying to create a brand identity?
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's not healthy to do something where your past identity negatively impacts what you're doing because I feel like that's really limiting and it's almost like I think it's like a lie. When you have a
Mm-hmm.
lie, you have to use more lies to cover up, the lie. And when you're doing something that doesn't naturally make sense with who you are and the things that you've done within reason, of course, like if you're a crazy criminal and you've done these things, like, okay, maybe you don't want to share that past. But if you're just a normal person who's, done things, experienced stuff, I would find it to be exhausting to have to constantly
Yeah.
shield my current business or venture from what I've done
Hmm.
in the past. So that's just not something
Yeah.
that I choose to do for myself. Like, I'm too tired at this point in my life to have to do that. So like, I'm a package deal. Like, this is who I
Yeah.
am. And if people don't like it, okay.
Yeah.
But I do think that I'm also a very different person in person. You know,
Okay.
obviously, like, you have an internet persona, and I try to be authentic, but it's not the whole picture and it's not the whole story.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
always find it really funny when people meet me. They're like, wow, you are not at all like I expected you to be. And I'm like, man, am I really, like, not showing my personality out
Hmm.
there? But I think there's just a natural guardedness and like trying to perform, and particularly when you compete in pageants, like they always call it a
Uh-huh.
pageant patty. Like, you're putting on this, the costume and the whole deal, and like how you're presenting to the world is very professional. And then when people meet me in person, they're like, wow, you really shoot from the hip. Like, you've got this dark sense of humor. I never would have, expected that of somebody like you, because they have this idea of who you are. So
Yeah.
I always find it really refreshing to get to meet people in the flesh, because there's something about the screen that doesn't tell the whole story.
Yeah. I think the positivity continues on and offline. At least that's the sense that I'm getting. So I'm very fascinated by the routines that people follow. And you, obviously, as I said, like you juggle so many roles. You're also a mom, which is the toughest job in the world. So, also the most important. So, business owner, taking care of your kid, running a nonprofit, which has a gravity all its own, and also advocating for all of these issues that clearly they need you, that community needs you. So how do you balance it, the kind of rituals you follow every day too that help you maintain your sanity as you juggle all these roles?
Well, I will be the first to say that there is no schedule. I am like the least organized person on the planet, and I don't know how I do it. I think becoming a mom, I have really realized, like, it's the first time where I'm like, man, there are only so many hours in the day, and like, you can't
Yeah.
do it all.
Yeah.
And so, whew, it becoming a mom has made me realize, like, there's a small window of when I have to get stuff done. So that has given me more structure in my life than I've ever had before, because I've always had this like fly by the seat of my pants sort of schedule where it's like, oh, every day changes and I just figure it out. But now it's like, okay, I wake up, I send my daughter to nursery. She's in nursery from, this time until this time. And
Hmm.
that's when I have to get stuff done, because it's really the only hours in the day. So that helps structure things, but I would be a big fat liar to say that I like have a bunch of rituals and I use my planner and I do this and that. Like, it's a state of chaos every single day. Somehow most of the things get done, but not all of the things get done. So if anyone out there is like looking to me for advice, like, I'm the worst person. Like, what would be great is to have like a personal assistant who could really like get in there and make me be organized. And I always wonder, like, man, how many things I could accomplish if I was just a little bit more organized. But unfortunately, not who I am as a person. Wasn't blessed with that gift.
I love that answer because I think more and more of us need to know that this is also a way of getting things done. We
Oh,
all have
chaos! Yeah,
these, yeah, like periods in our life where things are going to be chaotic. Like you have a kid, kid trumps everything, right?
yeah.
So yeah, even that is a way like that this is also a type of process of getting things done and building a career. So I love that answer, absolutely love it. Now my last question, I make this one a fun one. So you're a very dedicated mom, we know that. So if you had the superpower where you could use to incept one idea or one belief in the mind of every child in the world, this one idea will take root and be like a strong force in that kid's life, what would that one idea or belief be?
Oh, I don't know why it's like getting me emotional, but I think the best gift that my parents ever gave me was a sense of personal efficacy. And I think as I get older, sometimes now it's like a delusional self confidence. But I found it to be such a gift to never in my life feel like I couldn't do something that I wanted. And I don't know how they really instilled that in me, but I think it's multifaceted, where my parents would never look at someone else's success and say, ugh, why do they have that? Or, oh, I want that. There was envy was not an okay word in our household. It was always, these are aspirational figures. And if you want that, you can have it. You just have to work hard. And it was really like down to like, you want to be an astronaut? Cool, you can do it. You want to be the president of the United States? Absolutely, you can do that. You want to be a mom? You want to be a lawyer? You want to do all of these sort of things. It's just hard work. It's determination. You have the ability to do whatever you want. It's just working hard. And like, don't you dare fault that other person who has something that you want because you don't have it yet. You have no idea how much hard work and determination and everything that went into what they have, and the challenges and the doors that were shut in their faces. And so I think now that I'm older, I realize what a gift that is, because I see so many of my friends who are crippled with fear and anxiety and feeling like, oh, I can't do that. And it's so limiting, and it's so sad, because there are people with so much potential, and they, like we mentioned throughout this whole podcast, they get in their own way. So my dream would be that every child grows up with the same sense of, I can do whatever I want to do if I just work hard enough. And so, yeah, it's something that I always am really grateful. I look back on my mom and my time with her, and it was this very short 16 years, but the gifts that she was able to instill in me in that short period of time, I'll be forever grateful. And I hope I'm able to do that for my daughters as well. So sorry to get so emotional, but
No,
a very poignant question. Thank you.
And you gave a very, very beautiful answer, and I hope it comes true. I hope, if not through superpowers, just through good upbringing, we are all able to put those ideas into the minds of every kid out there, and nobody ever doubts themselves, and they go for whatever it is that they want. That would be a beautiful world to live in.
So we've reached the end of this episode. Thank you so much for watching and for sharing your time with me. You will find the links to the resources mentioned during the episode underneath this video. And if you would rather listen to these conversations, you can find the Experimental Podcast on most podcast platforms. If you enjoyed this conversation, or if you have something to add to it, please share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to hear more such conversation, do subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. I will see you in the next video. Till then, take care of yourself. Bye.